Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to today's show. Today we are going to get into a really interesting herb that is yet another one, as are all the herbs in the book that I'm discussing now, my newly published book, The Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast, which, as I always have to say, the caveat is weeds grow pretty much everywhere. And as diverse as my region is, North Carolina is like tropical at the coast and a climate in the mountains basically like upstate New York, and in between sand hills and even desert type areas and all kinds of swamps. If it grows in my region, it probably grows in yours, unless you're like at the North Pole or the Mojave Desert or something. These plants grow throughout the Americas for the most part. You know, different plants in the Amazon and such, I know that, but for the most part, you're going to find these just about anywhere in the Americas, certainly all of Western Europe, most of Eastern Europe, and most of Asia. So, yeah, my weeds are probably your weeds. This one is fascinating. We'll get to it in just a minute. I'll go and tell you the name, though. I'll tease it. It is Erysimum. Let me try that again. Erysimum. 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 And the second half of the name is very difficult to pronounce. Cheiranthoides. Cheiranthoides. So, while that may sound like a Polish word, it is actually the name of this herb, which has a long and storied history. It was one of those written about by Dioscorides, Gerard, Miss Grieve wrote about it. It's not so much in common use anymore. So this is, if you've been an herbalist for decades, this will still probably be new to you. Common name is treacle mustard, or more commonly, wormseed. Wormseed mustard, wormseed wallflower. And so we'll get into that one just in a few minutes. But I like to start with the recipe of the day. And this is coming from my new book, The Spring Foraging Cookbook. And, I love to write and speak about herbal medicine. My first passion is cooking. And really, I got into herbs through foraging. So I'm really excited about this cookbook. I'll have them for the different seasons, and these are companions to my Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. As always, all titles available on Amazon, or you can get a PDF directly from me. Amazon is the only way to get a print copy, a hardback right now. So, if you're interested in that, go for it. But now, of course, if you've been into foraging any at all in your entire lifetime, you knew I had to get around to asparagus. I mean, after all, it was Yule Gibbons' book, Stalking the Wild Asparagus, that brought wild foods back into common parlance, the public domain. I don't know, how do you want to say it? I mean, after the World Wars and the industrialization of America, by the 1950s, people were really eating a lot of canned foods, packaged foods, frozen dinners. That's when you started to see a lot of the wide variety of like heirloom produce that people used to grow disappearing from the grocery store shelves. Food was supposed to be more, and especially by the 60s, when women really moved into the workplace. And by the 70s, we're getting microwaves and all that. Food was more about convenience than, good nutrition, interesting flavors. And really, people who had grown up in the countryside, who had grown up on farms, or they'd grown up hunting, fishing, foraging, and all that, were really encouraged, I think, by the culture and by various elements. Obviously, everyone was told they had to go get a college degree and they had to become professional, right? Or they would go into a factory and work, or something like that. But they were supposed to get off of the farm. Well, there, you can see in the magazines of the time, they shifted from people even fishing for food to cook for dinner, which is the only reason I fish, to sport fishing. There was a huge change in the men's magazines. No longer was it about going out and running a trot line for catfish or catching a bunch of bluegills or perch, bringing them home and frying them up for supper. It was about going out on a boat and catching a huge marlin or something, right? And you saw that in hunting. The men's magazines from the era really stopped carrying recipes or tips on, storing your meat properly and all that. You see that just totally fade out by about 1970. It was all about the trophies. It was all about having that big old deer head to hang on your wall. I'm a meat hunter. I'm a meat fisherman. I'm not a trophy anything. And, trapping was just totally frowned on, at least by the 90s. But as far as foraging, people were really even discouraged from gardening. And then comes Yule Givens. It went from literally people in the 50s and 60s would be ashamed to admit that they would pick something wild from the ground and eat it, to Yule Givens being somewhat of a celebrity on talk shows and even doing grape nuts commercials. And it all started with stalking the wild asparagus. Yule Gibbon, he was sort of a Renaissance man. He was sort of a maybe he was a writer at heart. He was a woodsman at heart, and he didn't have much of a heart for working a day job. He really would have been considered kind of lazy. But he knew what his passion was, and when those books began to sell and when his articles began to run in magazines, he threw himself into it full force. He just hadn't found his passion in life yet. Great writer, interesting guy. He wrote, I guess, 4 books, maybe 4 books total. Stalking the Wild Asparagus, which is all about foraging. Stalking the Healthful Herbs. He is also one of the key figures in bringing herbal medicine back to America in a time where people thought those was, just old wives' tales and everyone had to go to the doctor and get a pharmaceutical remedy. He wrote, actually my favorite, Stalking the Blue-Eyed Scallop, which is about going to every little creek and inland waterway and salt marshes and finding all the seafood that people don't even know is there, which is a great passion of mine. I talk about that a lot in the Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. All those little shellfish, all those little, from eels to crabs, the opposite of sport fishing. You're actually going out to bring back a few pounds of seafood to cook up for yourself or your family. And it's just delicious, and it's so abundant, and he really, I love the way he emphasizes fishing with a cane pole and a cork and a hook, as opposed to all the expensive tackle. That's also a big part of my philosophy. I think it was George Herder that said most of what is sold in sporting goods stores is to catch the fishermen, not to catch fish. And he would know. He owned the largest sporting goods chain in the entire country at the time. And the last one was Stalking the Faraway Places. He loved to travel. He was just sort of a beach bum for a long time. And, that was before he became an author and everything. So that first book, Stalking the Wild Asparagus, we owe the renaissance of the foraging movement, a lot of the back to the land movement of the 60s, basically when the hippie kids left the suburbs and decided to go try to check out the woods and learn to hike and fish and forage and get into herbal medicine. Of course, that was just a fad for most of them. But without that fad, a lot of that knowledge would have been completely lost between generations. We could survive 2 generations without that knowledge being passed on. We couldn't survive 3. And you got to thank Gil Gibbons for that. Interesting guy, controversial character sometimes. Along with him, George Herter, that I mentioned. Byron Dalrymple, another really great one. He was one that also was big into wild foods and fishing, what people call trash fish, which to me it's an offensive term, Bradford Angier, certainly. Bradford Angier was actually a generation probably before Gil Gibbons. He did much the same. He was more focused on like Alaska and Canada and all that, but still, he very influential. Billie Joe Tatum in the late 60s and early 70s. She really deserves to be remembered along with Gil Gibbons because her works are very good too. And then the Peterson Field Guides. Had the Peterson Field Guides not put out the field guides for wild edible plants, for herbal medicine, etc., by region, I can't tell you how many people would never have been able. I mean, people ask me all the time, what's a good field guide? And I always say Peterson Field Guide for, your region, for herbal medicine, for foraging, whatever. And whenever there are other herbalists or other foragers, everybody weighs in. Yeah, that's the best. Those are the best. Had I not had that, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And that's basically how I feel too, because, I didn't have a lot of instruction from other people when I was growing up, learning to forage, learning to, I did have instruction on herbal medicine and all that, but as far as plant identification, without the Peterson Field Guides, I wouldn't have known what the heck I was eating. Seriously. I mean, the Audubon guides were good. The Peterson are 10 times better and cheaper, actually, because Audubon has all those pretty pictures in there. And you know how I feel about pretty pictures of plants. They're pretty much useless. Got a great field guide from the University of Georgia Press. They do really good ones. Just Saturday it came. It's Woodland Plants of the Southeast. I don't think you can have too many. I've got dozens on my shelf. I'm flipping through and I'm like, what is that? And it was a picture of skullcap, and it was such a bad picture I couldn't even identify the plant. And I grow skullcap in my garden and in pots. I mean, I know that plant like the back of my hand, and even I couldn't identify it because it was a bad picture. Otherwise, the book's excellent. So let's talk about asparagus. Ironically, asparagus is not a truly wild vegetable. Asparagus was introduced to North America by the French in the 1600s. Now, why do I say that's ironic? Well, long before dinosaurs even walked the earth, the only life growing on land were ferns and giant asparagus that could be like 1,000 feet tall and bigger than a redwood tree. So, I mean, the asparagus is literally one of the most ancient plants on Earth. So anyway, don't know why it wasn't really growing in North America or South America. It was seems to have found its home in Asia and Europe. Well, the French brought it in the 1600s, and by post-colonial America, asparagus was common on most farms. One of the most loved heirloom varieties is even named for our first president's wife. It's Martha Washington. Washington and Jefferson were both farmers who grow asparagus. What we now know as wild asparagus is actually feral asparagus. It's a perennial plant, and like dandelions, plantains, burdock, and other plants that are now considered weeds, asparagus was brought here by our ancestors to be used as food and medicine. And yes, asparagus has medicinal value. It is good for the kidneys, the liver, the bowels, good for digestion. It helps lower fevers. It's particularly good for the urinary system, helping with both kidney and bladder stones, infections, and cystitis. So, yeah, I mean, I'm actually talking about a medicinal herb as well as a wild edible. But the wild asparagus, so-called, that, Gil Gibbons named it, is actually cultivated asparagus that got out of somebody's garden or is growing where someone used to have an asparagus patch. Doesn't matter. It's all delicious. It's easy to identify, and it's one of those early spring plants, well, I mean, actually keep going well into early summer, depending on where you live. And, well, I guess depending where you live, you can get a fall flush too. I don't know. But it's one that I look forward to every year. And I mean, it's certainly an excuse to get out in nature. And when you find your asparagus patch, it's perennial. It's going to come back there every year. So be sure to take note of it, and you know exactly where to go. And I mean, it's so good. Okay, I mean, I enjoy asparagus raw, but it is actually more nutritious when cooked. It's actually more bioavailable when cooked. Most vegetables and all mushrooms must be cooked so we can get their full nutritional value. I'm sorry if you're some raw foodie out there and that upsets you. You have to cook your food, with the exception of meat, actually. Meat and fish can be perfectly enjoyed raw. But vegetables and mushrooms need to be cooked properly, not boiled for an hour, but cooked to be fully bioavailable. There's, the raw foods diet is like the vegan diet. You're actually going to damage your health in the long run. The key, though, for all these vegetables and such, especially asparagus, is not to overcook them. We never want our precious and hard salt wild foods to resemble anything mushy and drab from a can. Always harvest asparagus carefully, break the stalk from the base, or cut it cleanly. Remember, it's perennial and it will grow back. Don't do anything to damage the root system. Asparagus is not an annual. It's not a one-and-done plant. And always, like I said, mark them, care for your asparagus patches, and you can eat from them for the rest of your life, and so will your kids and your grandkids. I normally cook asparagus two ways, and very simple. It's the steam saute method, where you just simply take your asparagus, put it in a pan with a little bit of water and olive oil or butter, some salt. Put it on the stove, put the lid on for just a few minutes. Water comes to a boil, let it steam off. Then you can just saute the asparagus in the same pot. Maybe sprinkle a little lemon juice on it. It's delicious. You're good to go. Otherwise, I will grill it. And I'll get into more detail probably under fiddlehead ferns because there's so much like asparagus. So, we'll talk a lot more about steam saute method in future shows. And grilling, I mean, wraps... a great option is to wrap your asparagus in bacon and grill it. That's just fantastic. But I also really enjoy cream of asparagus soup and frittatas made with asparagus. So let's just go ahead and get those out of the way because they're delicious. And I actually have a taste for cream of asparagus soup right now. I may have to go make some. So about a pound plus minus fresh asparagus, butter, milk, flour. I'm not giving any proportions here because it's a soup. You can make more or less of it as you want. Salt and pepper to taste. Allium of your choice. You can go with shallot, ramps, if your ramps are in season. Just finely sliced onion. Garlic would be a little strong. Leek would be a better choice, but yeah, I'd use any of them or a combination. All of them if I wanted to. Chives. Yeah, definitely chives work. Bacon. I love my bacon. Some chicken or beef broth or stock. And some white wine. And I'll give you probably in a future show. I've said in a past episode how I make my stocks. So you can reference that. We'll come back to it again. So don't even worry about it. It's boiled bones. That's basically what it is. Boiled bones and vegetable bits that have been roasted off in the oven. Simple as that, if it's a stock. Now, if it's broth, you boil some meat in it too. But, some herbs. Great. It's very, very flexible, very traditional, and way better than anything you're going to buy in a store. You can make beef stock, you can make chicken stock, you can make seafood stock, fish stock, whatever, game stock. You can keep these in the freezer, and you're going to have better flavor, better nutrition than anything you can buy in a store. And you're using scraps, bones, some bits of meat that are still stuck to the bones, vegetable scraps, onion peels, the ends of tomatoes, whatever, and maybe a handful of herbs from the garden or some dried herbs from the cabinet. It doesn't cost you, I don't know. You can make a gallon for 50 cents if you don't have to, buy the bones as, soup bones. If you do, it's still not going to cost you more than a couple of dollars, and you'll have it, and it's here whenever you need it. So a little white wine, Chardonnay's probably the best. Corn, etc. Any vegetable you might want to add along with your asparagus. My choice would be probably corn. So, corn and asparagus share a chemical that is actually enhanced by Chardonnay. The flavor of both those vegetables is enhanced by a chemical in a flavonoid, I guess it is, in the Chardonnay. So that's really the reason I think adding a little bit of wine to this dish, especially Chardonnay, is going to be best. So, instructions: begin by simmering all of your asparagus trimmings in broth and stock. You can use, everything you're not eating as a fresh vegetable, or just chop up your asparagus, whatever you got, right? Season with any herbs you like: parsley, thyme, chive, celery tops are my favorite. So, in a soup pot, fry up your bacon and reserve. Add the butter and fat. Toss in chopped asparagus. I like to leave the tips whole because they have a nice mouthfeel. And the finely diced shallot, onion, etc. Any other vegetables you might be using. Corn's really good, as I just mentioned. The oakiness of the wine is what really brings out that flavor in those vegetables. It's really good. Artichoke's similar and would be a very good addition. Artichoke is excellent with asparagus. Cook until tender and reserve or push to the sides of the pot. Add some more butter and an equal amount of plain flour. Cook, stirring gently until the flour is cooked and no longer has a raw taste or smell. Stir in the stock or broth. Add a little at a time, making sure to avoid lumps. You're basically making a gravy, or a roux, as it's called in cooking. Then add your milk. Cream's a nice touch, but since you're using butter, it's not essential. Season and add herbs to taste, adding wine toward the end. Any herbs you like. You now have an amazing cream of asparagus soup. You can enjoy it with a little Swiss and Parmesan cheese grate on top, some toast or crackers or whatever you like. But it doesn't have to stop there. You can make the same cream of soup base can be used for any soup that's a cream soup. Cream of onion, cream of mushroom. You just learn to make a cream soup. It can also be used to make fantastic casseroles. Take some chicken, maybe breast, cut into chunks or cubed, or maybe some finely sliced beef. Fish, crab is fantastic. Game, sweet garden peas and broccoli work wonderfully. Just mix that up with your cream of soup. You want it fairly thick, but just let the milk kind of simmer down a little bit. Literally, you can make whatever you like using the soup as a base. You can do vegetable casseroles, like sweet garden peas and broccoli are fantastic. Top them with cheddar and pecan halves. Just simply brown your meat, sweat down any vegetables you like, mix it with the soup. Maybe toss in a couple of tablespoons of mayonnaise if you like things a little bit richer. Put the mixture in a baking dish, chop with breadcrumbs or poppy seeds, chia seeds, etc. Chopped nuts, grated cheese. Bake until brown and bubbly, and you will be amazed what wonderful meals can be produced in your kitchen. Seriously, being about half French, I am a casserole fanatic, but not when it comes from a can. It's got to be made homemade with a cream of soup, which, like I said, is nothing more than making a roux of butter and flour, adding some stock and milk, herbs, salt, and pepper to taste. That's it. And then you can make anything you want. Another great way to use asparagus is to roast it with fish, chicken, game, beef. I usually do this when baking a salmon. Just put the asparagus right in the roasting pan with it, with some salt, pepper, herbs, olive oil, maybe a little parsley and dill. Cover the top with sliced lemon and onions. Around the fish, just arrange the asparagus pieces in a baking dish. Put a pat or two of butter on each pile of asparagus and season them with salt and pepper. Add about a glass of white wine. Bake it until it's done, until the fish flakes. Fantastic. It's an easy one-dish meal. You can substitute any fish you like. Maybe not catfish, but any fish you think would taste good with that dish, go for it. Sometimes I use trout. Sometimes I use red snapper. My all-time favorite fish is red snapper. Combination makes incredible pan sauce, by the way. Take all those drippings off the fish and vegetables, spoon it over the fish and asparagus, serve with a baked potato or some Jerusalem artichokes, and out of bounds good. Really, that is like gourmet stuff. That's, you think about my home in the mountains, my big porch, and I've got a trout stream out there, and I've got wild plants growing around me. That's the kind of thing I'm eating on the porch on an evening with a nice glass of wine. So super easy breakfast meal or brunch. There's probably more of a brunch meal you can do with asparagus is frittatas. Frittatas are basically just a lazy man's omelet, okay? And they're really pretty, and they always impress because, what you do, you arrange the vegetables in the bottom of your frying pan, skillet, whatever you want to call it, Put your eggs and cheese in on top of that. Cook it off on the bottom. Then flip it over. No, then put the pan under the broiler in the oven so it cooks the top. Then when you serve it, flip it over onto a plate and cut it in wedges like a pie or pizza. And you've got that just pretty arrangement of vegetables. Like you could do your asparagus out like little rays of the sun and put cherry tomatoes in between, or whatever you want to do. I mean, it's super frittata method, just like the casserole and cream of soup method, can be used for anything you can imagine. So let's say you've got some trimmed asparagus spears. You've got some alliums, any kind of onion family vegetable. Ramps are always going to be my choice. Maybe 3 eggs beaten with a little bit of milk. Other vegetables, like I said, cherry tomatoes are nice. Peppers, always good. Sliced. Mushrooms. Mushrooms are optional, but man, are they tasty. Maybe some ham, cheese of your choice, oil, salt, and pepper, any herbs you like. So heat your pan to about medium high and add some oil or whatever fat you like, butter. A mix. I like to do a mix of olive oil and butter many times. Brown your mushrooms in the fat, being careful not to crowd the pan. You want your mushrooms to brown. If you crowd them, the steam comes out and it keeps them from browning. Get some good color on the mushrooms. Avoid stirring them around too much. Think of them just like meat. Just let them sit there and brown. Toss in your veggies and saute at least until the onions are translucent. If you use tomatoes, you really should squeeze the seeds and pulp out so they don't make things soggy. That's sort of a little chef's tip that makes a huge difference. And save that back. If you want a Bloody Mary with your frittata, you've got all that good tomato juice you can use, or you could throw it in with 1,000 things, really, from soups to sauces. Never throw away your squozen tomato juices and seeds. You can use any vegetables and herbs you like. And I let the garden and whatever I'm foraging decide that. Either brown the ham with the mushrooms or add it at this point. I like to use a country-style cured ham or cooked ham, so when it's added really doesn't matter. Shrimp or crab meat is an excellent addition. Would be when you add your seafood. I don't think most people combine ham and seafood enough. I mean, that is really something culturally for me, and it's a combination I just love. Arrange the vegetables and meat so they just look pretty, just in the bottom of the pan. Just make like a little mosaic out of them or whatever. Something like a stained glass window. So pour in the beaten eggs and remove from the heat. The eggs will cook on the pan because the bottom's of it hot, and it'll cook off the heat. If you leave it on the heat, they might burn, So that's another little tip. Once the eggs are firmed up, add whatever kind of grated cheese you like, Emmental, Gruyere, Parmesan. I can't think of any cheese that would be bad. At this point, maybe not Limburger. That may overwhelm the dish a little bit, but just about anything else. Some brie would be fantastic, even cheddar. So blue cheese. I love blue cheese. So anyway, at this point, put some fresh herbs on top. Maybe some chives, maybe some whole leaf basil. Toss in a few edible flowers. Whatever looks nice and would complement the flavors. But for the top, use fresh herbs. Dry herbs would burn. So either place it in a hot oven or preferably under a broiler. My tongue's getting tied. And cook just until the cheese is brown and bubbly. And I like to use the broiler so the eggs don't get overcooked. They're cooked on the bottom, cooked on the top, and they still stay a little moist in the middle. That's the way I like it, but it's totally up to you. Everybody likes their eggs differently. And when done to your taste, turn the frittata out onto a large plate so the veggie side is up. Slice like a pie and eat. And the nice thing about frittatas, aside from being tasty and extremely nutritious, one of the most nutritious meals you can think of, you can scale them up and down and make a quick breakfast or brunch for as many people as you need to serve. A big one's really no more effort than a small one. Just use a bigger pan and more ingredients. So now let's get into that herb, which is called a weed. And it is, as I said, wormseed, or Erysimum cheiranthoides, something like that. So Dioscorides, as I mentioned, wrote about this plant. He said Erysimum grows about the towns and yards of houses. So even then it was kind of considered weedy, right? He describes the plant, and I think you should just look it up online. You'll get much better pictures, or if you got some good field guides. He said that licked in with honey, it was good for excessive discharges of the chest, spitting up rotten stuff, coughs, jaundice, sciatic pains of the hips and sciatic nerves, It is taken as a drink against deadly medicinal drinks as an antidote. And he's saying basically an antidote for poison. Rubbed on with water or honey, it is good for hidden diseases of the cornea, hard lumps, glandular tumors, inflammation from stones such as urinary and kidney, inflammation of the breast. It generally thins and warms, but is made milder for syrups, first steeped in water and dried or bound into a linen cloth, wrapped around with kneaded flour and roasted. Erysimum pounded into small pieces with wine should be taken as a drink for pains in the intestines. It is also called Chamaplion by the Magi. We won't get into all that. But you can see in ancient Greece, they actually had some really unique uses for this plant. Later, it became basically just a cure for intestinal wounds. But as Dioscorides said, it was good for discharges of the chest, spitting up of rotten stuff. So we're talking, probably lung infections, coughs, jaundice, sciatic pains, and then also used topically for various inflammatory conditions and bladder stones. And that's this is a very overlooked plant. So we need to do a little more investigation of this and find out what uses may have been lost to us over the last 2,000 years or so. In Gerard's time, it was called treacle wormseed. Treacle's a type of syrup. I'm not sure how it got that name, but maybe maybe they combined it with treacle. I have no idea. He said, the juice of the herb healeth ulcers of the mouth, and that the poor peasant doth use the oil in banquets and the rich in their lamps. Now, what does he mean by that in Elizabethan English? Well, obviously we know it would be good for ulcers of the mouth, but the oil of the seed, I suppose, was used by poor peasants as a culinary oil, a food oil. And the rich, though, they were probably importing olive oil, and would burn it in their lamps like lamp oil. So there's another use for this so-called weed that we need to look into. Dioscorides had mentioned that the seed was somewhat like fenugreek. So it's not it's not that small of a seed, and I guess it would take a lot to press some oil out of it. But hey, that could come in handy at some point. And now we get into the use of why it gets the name wormseed. He said, the seeds stamped and given children to drink killeth the worms, and driveth them forth by both siege and vomit. So, apparently it's a pretty strong purgative, as we might say. It would cause people to essentially throw up and have diarrhea and kill the worms. So we have much more pleasant vermifuges, especially that we use, they're in use pharmaceutically these days. But we have to remember that in our ancestors' time, the main causes of illness were spoiled food, bad water, and intestinal parasites. If things happen and things got really bad and we couldn't go to a doctor, we couldn't go to a pharmacy, even though this is rather an extreme herbal remedy for intestinal worms, it could save your life. And may be really good to know. I mean, kids still get worms, especially where conditions aren't really sanitary, like many preschools and daycares. Basically, one kid has some of the little eggs of the worms in its poop, and a little gets on the floor, and somehow another kid gets that in its mouth, and that's how it's spread. And it's always going to be that way. It'll be that way from the beginning of time, until the end of time, no matter how disgusting it is to our modern tastes. But, just today, I just received word that 3 of our soldiers were killed by a drone attack in, I think it was in Jordan, and the drone came from Syria, which means it's the Houthi rebels or that are financed and backed by Iran. Who knows? We could literally be in World War III by the time we get up tomorrow morning, by the time you're listening to this. And if there's a good chance we wouldn't win this one. With China and nuclear powers, China and Russia opposed to us, there's a very good chance we wouldn't win this one. And actually, we could be reduced to pretty primitive conditions in the blink of an eye. So whereas, herbs like this may seem a little extreme to our modern ears and unpleasant, and you think, well, that's, old esoteric information, it's like, Ray Hicks used to say, I was taught herbal medicine by Rosie Hicks predominantly, storytelling by Ray Hicks, and, well, wildcrafting, harvesting wild herbs from Ted Hicks, their son. Ray was a character, but he would look at you and he'd get real serious. He'll say, there's going to come a time when people are going to need this information, y'all. People don't know it now. And he was serious. He was saying this was my commission to carry on this information because there's going to come a time when people are going to need it again. So never forget that. Even if it's an herb that you think, oh, I'm never going to use that, keep that information because you never know. And when it comes to a weed, they're usually pretty easy to find. We just need to know how to use them. In Culpeper's time, about 100 years after Gerard, it was called Hedge Mustard. And he said, it is singularly good against all diseases of the chest, lungs, hoarseness of the voice. Oh, and by the use of the decoction thereof for a little space, meaning for a short time, those who have recovered who have utterly lost their voice and almost their spirits also. So I guess hoarseness and weakness. He said the juice thereof made into a syrup or licking medicine with honey or sugar is no less effectual for the same purpose and for all other coughs, wheezing, and shortness of breath. The same is also profitable for those that have the jaundice, pleurisy, pains in the head, back, and loins, and for torments in the belly or colic. The seed is held to be a special remedy against poisons and venom. It is singularly good for the sciatica and joint aches, ulcers, cankers in the mouth, throat, or behind the ears, and no less for the hardness and swelling of the testicles or of women's breasts. So again, that's a remedy you're probably not going to want to need, but if you need it, you're going to need it. Miss Grieve really makes things much more clear in her book, A Modern Herbal, 1930s. She says the treacle hedge mustard, by now they had combined all the names, of the treacle hedge mustard. The seeds are intensely bitter and have been used by country people as a vermifuge, that means something that kills intestinal worms and parasites, hence the second name of wormseed or treacle wormseed. The seeds have also been given in obstructions of the intestines and in rheumatism and jaundice with success. When taken in small doses, they are purgative, but care must be taken not to administer in too large doses. She says that the hedge mustards and garlic mustard were all formerly allocated to the same genus, which belongs to Erysimum. Garlic mustard we'll cover in a different chapter. We'll actually talk about this one more in the book on foraging because it's one of my favorite wild edibles, by the way. Another species, Erysimum orientale, or hare's ear treacle mustard, is also part of that family. John Kehoe tells us in the Irish tradition, a syrup made from the seeds and some honey loosens viscous and clammy phlegm, so it's again good for getting congestion up out of the lungs. It is also good against old cough, shortness of breath, sciatica, jaundice, and colic pains. A decoction in wine is very good for colic. Plants for future states in modern use. A drink made from the crushed seed is used as a vermifuge. It is intensely bitter, but has been used on children and expels worms both by vomit and by excretion. A decoction of the root has been applied to skin eruptions. And Botany in a Day, another book I would not be without. While it's not a field guide, it teaches you how to identify plants as a botanist would, and it is so much better than anything. You get that and you get your Peterson field guide, really you got all you need. Okay, it's just going to take time and study. Botany in a Day by Thomas J. Opal tells us that the plant mashed with water has been used to prevent sunburn. Also important, sunburns are really painful. And, if you spend a lot of time outside, you can get to the point where they're debilitating. And, in a survival situation where you couldn't take that much time away for your garden or you need to be out fishing or something, or whatever, that could also come in very, very handy. And remember, chamomile tea is very soothing to sunburn. Of course, so is aloe. The pulp, the crushed insides of prickly pear cactus pads, excellent. An oak bark soak is astringent. It pulls some of the inflammation out. They're very birch twigs in a bath are both astringent and they're soothing because they have salicin, like aspirin, in them. There are many remedies that we've talked about before and we'll talk about again for sunburn, which is usually a very minor thing for us in modern America, but it certainly was not for the colonists that landed at Roanoke or Jamestown. I mean, sunburn and mosquitoes just about killed them and probably did lead to the end of the lost colony. Between sunburn and mosquitoes, which were often carrying malaria, and their lack of knowledge of local, forage plants. They had to try to grow everything in the garden unless the Indians told them how to do it. They were in bad shape. They were in really bad shape. And yeah, anyway, and of course, growing up around the Lumbee, I know a lot about the Lost Colony, and probably have some heritage from the Lost Colony in my lineage. So I take a particular interest, not only because of the region, but because of the history and the culture and everything that means to us around here. Anyway, y'all, have a great day. We're only a couple months away, depending on where you are, from getting ready to go out looking for that asparagus. So, feel free to go ahead and get some from the store right now and try out a couple of those recipes. See if you like it. Very much to my taste. I do not like mushy boiled or canned asparagus. I like my asparagus to be somewhat crisp and bright in flavor, and give it a try. You might like it that way too. And if you think you don't like asparagus, it's probably because all you ever had was the garbage from the can. So really, give it a try. Just remember snap it off where the base of the stem begins to get tough. But don't throw those away. Just snap it off right there. If you're going to do steam saute method, if you're going to do a frittata or whatever, feel free to use the entire rest of it. But those little hard ends, simmer them down in some stock for making your soups. Put them in with your stock. So, have a good one, and I'll talk to you next week.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.